It's time for the third annual 31 Days of Halloween horror film retrospective celebration, whatever you want to call it. Alright, so for those of you who don't know how this works, very quick summary. There's 31 days in October. So every day in October I'm going to upload a new video chronologically looking at the history of the horror film. And when I say chronologically, I'm not talking about we're going back to like the 80s. We're going back to like the silent film era. In fact, the first movie we have today is made in 1913. So over the course of the entire month of October, we're going to be chronicling the horror genre as it shifts from the 1910s all the way up to the 2010s. So literally 100 years of filmmaking to go over. And we're going to chronicle, exactly not just the films themselves, but how the genre changes, how filmmaking as a whole changes. How it changes in the tone and the concepts and the content of the films kind of reflect the general change of society over the last 100 years. So all that to say, a little bit of pretentious stuff, but not a whole lot. So don't be too frightened as we move forward. Alright, so we're going to begin day one, our first movie on the set list, The Student of Prague from 1913. And I've done some research, and this is a movie where unless there's someone out there who can tell me otherwise, this is the first horror film that's feature length that has survived intact, that is still out there. If there's another horror film out there from earlier than 1930, which is complete and has subtitles and can actually be sort of considered a complete, wholly watchable film, I haven't heard of it. So this is about as far back as we can go for full-length horror films. I mean, I know there were shorts made before this one, but this is the first major 90-minute long feature-length horror movie. And it's interesting because you got to remember the time of this movie coming out, the idea of just feature-length films themselves existing was kind of a novel concept. So the idea of any particular film having a direct sort of genre attachment to it, still not really kind of a central idea of what filming was, right? So back in the day, this was before the term horror film even existed. Horror as a genre did not exist when the movie was made. And the idea of people actually paying money to go be scared, completely novel idea. No one had thought of that. That hadn't crossed anyone's mind. The idea that, films can convey a certain emotion and you can market them and produce them to have a certain particular effect on the viewer, not even thought about yet. This was still experimental. They were still getting their wits about them. And as you'll see in this movie, and really probably up until the 1930s, most horror films really weren't horror films as we know them. They had some sort of supernatural and metaphysical bent, but the way they were produced, they weren't really trying to scare you per se. They were trying to tell a melodramatic story, or in the case of this one and a whole lot of other movies from the era, like The Avenging Conscience by D.W. Griffith, they're all morality plays. Like the old EC comics of yore, where there's horrible stuff going on and the supernatural, but it's to prove a point that if you do really dickish things, you will die a horrible death, or a horribly ironic death at the absolute least. So this movie, it's more or less like a basic drama with some supernatural elements, but it's not really meant to convey terror, to terrify you, if that makes any sense, right? By the way, I'm going to use, if that makes any sense, because I had a cinema teacher in college who said that all the time, so I'm just going to borrow that because I like continuity. Alright, so the general idea. And this film's been remade plenty of times. It was directed by Paul Wegener, who also plays the main character. And this movie is sort of a loose adaptation of an Edgar Allan Poe story called William Wilson. But not really. It kind of takes that, but it also has a lot of other components. It's sort of like William Wilson combined with the old Faustian tale, except not quite. But you'll see it has that kind of component. We'll talk about it a little bit later on in the video. Alright, so basically, story about this one guy. This kid, he's going to the University of Prague. It's in the early 1800s. He is poor as poor can get, but he's really good with a sword. So, he's got that working for him. So, naturally, he falls in love with this chick that he saves from drowning. But because he's poor and she's rich, she doesn't want anything to do with him. Hey, we've all been there. So anyway, he's hanging out in his room one day, and then this magical demon guy comes up to him and says, "Hey, I will take anything you have and I'll give you 10,000 pieces of gold, and you'll be rich, rich as kings. But the dude is like so poor, he literally doesn't have anything in the room. I mean, he's got like a chair, and like that's it. So he's super duper poor. But then the demon says, hey, I know what I'll do. I will pay you 100,000 pieces of gold for your reflection in a mirror. And of course, the guy who's good with the sword is like, sure, I'll let you do it. Why not? It's just my reflection. Who cares? So he takes the mysterious magical guy. He takes the dude's reflection, and for whatever reason, it's never explicitly stated, but apparently that makes him like really good at game, because in the next scene he actually talks to the girl. He's rich now, so he can actually go out there and court her and try to get her to be his girlfriend. But as the movie goes along, images of the dude's reflection start showing up and like kind of freaking him out a little bit. You're not really sure what it's trying to do, but it's there. It's a plot component. And then we're introduced to a guy who is, and this is weird. This is the kind of thing where like I had to like rewind the video, like, wait a minute, what? Hold on. Is that there's a guy who shows up as a challenger to the main character as a love interest, but he's the cousin of the chick who the main character is trying to get in bed with. Like, that's canonical. That's not me. I had to like say, what? Why are they doing that? But apparently that's what they did in Europe back in the day. Everybody was doing it with their cousins. So he shows up, and they agree to have a duel because that's the only respectable way to end things. And right before the duel happens, instead of having to fight the chick's cousin, he has to fight his reflection. And he goes in there, and well, he ends up having like a sword fight, or not a sword fight, but a more traditional gun duel with his reflection. He shoots the reflection, but LOL, when he does it, he dies too. Movie over. Alright, so all that to say, I don't think it's really that good of a silent movie, because you can go back and watch stuff like The Avenging Conscience from 1914, the year after, by D.W. was way, way better. I mean, had a great story, way better acting, better special effects. So this one, it's kind of a lower tier movie from silent era. I mean, it's still alright, but nothing really great. Nothing that I think is extremely noteworthy, but it is significant because it's one of the first movies of its kind to kind of hint at what the horror genre would become. Because you got all the elements. You've got people making deals with the supernatural, which is still going on today. You have people trying to go after something so bad they want it, they're willing to sacrifice their basic morals to get it. Still a component of horror films of this day. And of course you have the really great ironic twist ending, which is certainly still a hallmark of horror film today. So it's not quite the cornerstone of horror that we're looking for that kind of gave us the modern idea of the horror film. Like I said, that didn't show up until like at least the 1920s, late 1920s at that. But just as establishing the genre, it's interesting. Even if you're not a big fan of horror films or even silent film in general, just being able to see what the world looked like in 1913, pre-World War I, is absolutely fascinating to me. And if you don't know subtitles, well, I'm sorry, you got to read, and you should read, because you can't just sit around watching Jason movies all day and consider yourself enlightened and a true film goer. So all that to say, it's a good movie, but not really a great movie. I mean, it's historical in some regards, so you should probably just see it just to be a student of the craft, but it's not really, holistically all that significant, right? Like, there's nothing in this movie as far as like aesthetics or tone or plot component, which I think really is central to the crucial development of the forward progress of horror filmmaking as a genre. But just as is, it's probably worth watching. I mean, just put it on as background noise. So I'll give it 2.5 pieces of candy out of 4. I'm not sure what candy we're using yet, but I'm sure we'll develop it over the course of the month. Alright, so that's it. That's the first movie in our list of 31 Days of Halloween, 31 Days of Horror-Ween. And come back tomorrow, we'll be taking a look at a film from 1919, which is one of not only the best pre-horror films ever made, but one of the best silent film epics ever. So definitely stick around for that.